Welcome to the Sports on Tap NEO High School Football Show. Be sure to join the conversation by liking us on Facebook and following us on Twitter at SOT Podcast. Use the hashtag SOTHSF. Here are your hosts, Rob Trump, Josh Jeffy, Ed Dick, and Sean Duffy.
And welcome to Sports on Tap, live from Z's Cream and Bean. It's our Ohio High School football coverage preview show. I'm Rob Trump. We have Josh Jeffy, Ed Dick, Sean Duffy, live from Z's here in Hinckley, Ohio. And guys, it's hard to imagine the high school football season is starting next Thursday.
It's upon us.
Man, where did the summer go, guys?
Well, if you see us right now, if you had a camera, it would be right on us because the sun is right on us.
Beating down.
And it's still really hot. But
I got to say, though, the sun is just glistening off my championship belt.
All right.
Sparkling off of it.
For those not familiar with the situation, Sean is our SOT Fantasy Football League champion for 2016. He does have the championship belt.
It's just unfortunate for that belt, really.
It's really
okay.
not.
It's really unfortunate.
You guys, it's found a home. It's very, very comfortable where it is.
That's okay. That's okay because, in December and maybe late December, early January, I'm going to be doing the same thing as LeBron and Kyrie did, and I'm going to be singing, I'm coming home, coming home. Tell the world I'm coming home. The belt's coming home, baby. Coming back
to Rob Troutman's house. Do you know what? I think the belt would love to be with the Herc.
You know what? Draft a good team, and then you got to beat the. You know what I mean? You got to beat the best in order to be the best. So.
Well, we'll have our draft this Saturday, but like Rob said, the high school football season does start next week, and we are very much looking forward to it. We were supposed to have New Brunswick head coach Mark Pinzoni on. I had a last-minute cancellation, so we'll look to have him on later on in the year. So we had to reschedule that. But tonight what we're going to do is kind of go over our conferences. Just a quick reminder, as how we've done it the past couple years now. I cover the GCC. Rob covers the Southwestern Conference. And Ed and Sean, they split up the Suburban League with the National and American divisions there. So they will be talking about that. So if you guys don't mind, I'll get into the GCC.
Hop into the GCC.
2016 was a fun year, an interesting year to say the least, where they had 3 teams make the playoffs. Solon was the champions of the conference. They finished with a 9-1 record overall, 7-0 in the conference. In a really big battle, we were actually at this game against Medina, who was another playoff team. They finished 8-2, 5-2 in the conference, and then the third and final playoff team was Euclid. They finished strong at 7-3, 5-2 in the conference. Kind of a surprise. Menor had somewhat of a down year for their particular circumstances. Menor finished 6-4 overall, but however had a 5-2 record in conference. Another surprise was Shaker Heights, who only had 3 victories all of last year, and none were in the conference. They actually went 5-5 this year with 3 wins in the conference, 3-4 in the conference. Elyria started off really hot, ended not so well, 3-7 overall, 1-6 in the conference, and then Brunswick and Strongsville both rounded out the GCC, both with 2-8 records, 1-6 in the conference. So looking at the conference itself, a lot of teams are looking to get stronger. A lot of teams are right back up in there. We'll start with the defending champion, Solon Comets, who are head coached by Jim McQuaid in his 15th season. Now, looking at this team as a whole, very high-powered offensive team, bringing back 2 studs on the offense. Thomas Wilkes, the running back, and Taj Ward, the wide receiver, are both coming back to their senior years. They're looking to have continued big years. The Solon defense is also looking to step up and really do some good things for them. Now, looking at the Solon Comets, the biggest question that I have for them is how do you replace quarterback Joe Bubonics, who and the O-line, which they lost quite a few starters on their offensive line. Joe Bubonics coming over from the safety position turned in some really solid quarterback play and actually led, again, Solon to a 9-1 record. So that's going to be the big question for the Comets on whether or not they're going to be able to replace that on the offensive side of the ball. But when you have a guy like Thomas Wilkes coming back as a running back, you can really rely on him and lean on him for your offensive game. Now, they open the season. They do have a tough schedule. They do open the season at Aurora, and that's going to be a really good game to start up the season. That's kind of going to give them a good test to see where they begin their conference. Now, moving on to the second-place team, 2016, the Medina Bees. Now, they're getting a familiar face back coaching with them. Larry Laird will be coaching for the Medina Bees. This is his first year back. He did lead them in 2010 to a successful playoff victory. He was at Strongsville for the past 3 seasons, finished with a 13-17 overall record there. Coming back to Medina, he is one of 4 new coaches in the GCC this year. So half the teams have new coaches for the GCC. Now, the Medina Bees returning some starters on defense, which was solid last year. The biggest loss that they had was all-conference, all-state. This guy was pretty much all everything for the Bees, and that's Jimmy Daw, the running back. That's going to be my biggest question for them. How are they going to reproduce the production, or where are they going to get the production that Jimmy Daw produced last year from this team? And that's going to be a huge question for him. That's going to be probably the biggest hurdle that Larry Laird will have to overcome in his first year back with the Bees. They open up Friday, August 25th. They play the Lakewood Rangers. That should be a really good matchup for them. It favors them considerably, but we'll see where they go from there.
Yeah, I don't know if you can replace a player like Jimmy Dawes. I mean, the things that guy did on the field.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Running the football, touchdowns. I mean, he was a touchdown machine.
But he also
we remember when we went to the Solon game at Medina. I mean, what a game and a barn burner that was.
Yeah, that was for the conference championship. And like you said,
he did not disappoint.
No,
let's put it that way.
No, and neither did Thomas Wilkes, for that matter. Yeah. Both those guys really were workhorses. I think combined they had 9 touchdowns during that game. So it was really unbelievable to watch that. And it's going to be tough to replace, but they're going to have to come together and try and do it.
Absolutely.
Hold on, Ed. Sorry about that, buddy.
Wow.
Go ahead.
Okay, I know I was late, but Jesus. The thing with Medina has always been consistency. Can they find a way to, build off of a big year like this? I mean, the last year they made the playoffs was in 2010. They had a great team then, led by I believe Justin Letts. I think Jason Suggs as a running back. So and after that they kind of fell off a little bit. Can they maintain the consistency and maintain the momentum they built last year? I know you have a different coaching staff in Medina, but it's a big school division, so you have to think that they should be able to, and Jimmy Daw is he's a once in every couple of year type of talent. Now it's up to build the whole team up to be able to get to that level. And
adding that on top, it's a new coach, new assistants. You got to bring back a new culture, and that's going to be tough to do. But Medina's got a lot of returning components from last year's playoff team, which they had 2 victories. So they're going to be pretty solid. Looking forward to it. Again, they open up at Lakewood, followed by Highland and Wadsworth before they get into conference schedule. Next on the list in the GCC, we have the Euclid Panthers. Again, last year 7-3 overall, coached by the one and only Jeff Rotsky in his 3rd year. The biggest returner coming back for the Euclid Panthers is the Cincinnati recruit Arquan Bush, the senior cornerback. He's their Mr. Everything on the defensive end, and he provided a lot of athletic ability back there for them. The biggest question I have for Euclid is this year, do they have enough offensive firepower to compete in the conference? This conference does have a lot of offensive firepower, and to go along with their schedule, they open up at Glenville, and then they travel to Aurora for their first 2 games, and then their first home game is against St. Ignatius. So that's a really tough non-conference schedule for them before they move into their conference.
Yeah, I think that'll be a pretty big measuring stick to see where you're at, starting off against St. Ignatius, because they're always a very good, fundamentally sound football team. So If they can compete in that game, learn from it. Euclid's been tough for a few years now. Can they bounce back and do well again this year? We saw them against a very good St. Ed's team last year in the playoffs, and didn't come out victorious, but they're a very tough team, very athletic team. So we'll see how they are this year.
A lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball, but again, does that talent translate into production? That's the one thing I think we saw against, and again, that's more maybe a credit to what we saw was St. Ed's defense really limiting the amount of downfield plays, a lot of the explosive plays that Euclid relies on, where they could get out on the edge and use their speed to an advantage. St. Ed did a great job of limiting that. So, when you look at Euclid, you want to see that speed and talent and on that side of the ball, as well as the defensive side of the ball, make big plays and be consistent all the way through the game and be able to overcome that adversity. And when we saw that in the playoff game specifically, we just did not see that from Euclid. It was more from on the St. Ed side in that point. But to your point, Josh, when you look at Euclid, there's all kinds of talent down there, but they need to start, converting that into production when it comes to playing with the teams like Solon, when it comes to playing against teams like Menor and Medina and all the big teams that play very sound defense and get into the picture of winning the GCC, and more importantly, get into the playoff picture, where they're not having to go up against a St. Ed's in the first round. Maybe they get higher up in the rankings to where they're not, drawing a state semifinalist.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Moving on, we have next on the list in the GCC is the Menor Cardinals, who, again, last year had, for them, a down year, only 6-4, 5-2, but they're, once again, head coached by Steve Trevisano, his 21st season, and this is my early pick for the early GCC champion. They are returning 14 out of their 22 starters. That includes quarterback Tadas Tatarunas, who's been their starter since his sophomore year. He's coming in, coming off of another solid year, 2,300 yards passing. His sophomore year, he had 2,900. So this year he's looking to best his numbers from last year. A couple of other the key returners, Stephen Baird, the wide receiver, and Noah Porter, one of the solid defensive ends, 6'4" kid, looking to really come back strong. They have all the makings of a team that can go deep into the playoffs. Again, their first three games, their non-conference games, are tough, though. They play our old friends Massillon. They travel to Massillon, Washington. Then they renew their rivalry with St. Ignatius, coming off that incredible game last year where it ended up 60-something to 50-something. It was just a
good defensive game there.
It was just outstanding. And then they do have another home game against Glenville before they head into conference play. So my biggest question that I have for this Menor team is, they're a lot of people's favorite to win the GCC and go deep in the playoffs. Can this team handle the hype? There's going to be a lot of hype. Now, this team is used to hype, right. With guys like in the past, Mitch Trubisky as their quarterback. I mean, they're always in it. Mm-hmm. But every year is different, and every year the kids, their mindset are different. That's where it's good to have a veteran coach like Steve Trevisano. He's been through the rigors of a long season, a deep playoff run. So my question is, can these kids handle it? I'm sure they will, but we'll see how it goes from there.
I think Coach Triv will make sure they handle it the right way. He's a great coach. He's he knows how to teach those kids how to handle certain situations, and I'm sure in practice now they're going through all kinds of different situations, pressure situations, and that Menor team every year, you say they had a down year, but they're still a pretty good football team. So I think they'll be able to handle a lot of
to their standards. 6-4 is a down year.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, most teams don't play a schedule nearly as tough as what Menor plays.
Right,
I mean, they've put themselves through the ringer in their non-conference schedule, which they've been doing for years, and now it's to the level where your conference schedule really doesn't dictate the fact. It doesn't necessitate the fact to have to play 3 tough non-conference games. It doesn't.
That's a good point.
I think Mentor's kind of stuck in a box though, where no one wants to play them. I mean, that's why they have to play a Massillon or the big private schools around here, because you're not going to have a team like Brecksville that wants to play Mentor on their own free will. Not that Brecksville's afraid of them or anything like that, but you just got to be You got to be honest with yourself about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think Ed's right. I mean, you look at those first 3 games, that non-conference schedule, you want to have momentum going into that. You want to be able to say we beat the teams, whether it be St. Ignatius or whether it be, Massillon, Washington, or Glenville. I mean, that's a pretty tough 3-game stretch before you get into the conference play. And the GCC is arguably one of the best conferences in Northeast Ohio and one of the most parity-ridden team. I mean, there's a lot of good teams in that conference, and to have a non-conference schedule like that, you got to win those games and to have that confidence going in, because then you have to deal with Solon, then you have to deal with Euclid, teams that can maybe hamstring you, and you can't look ahead on that. When you look at that schedule, there's no time for pause. There's no team that you could say, well, there may not be up to us talent-wise. From game 1 to game 10, you got to be on your toes, and Coach Trevisano knows that. I mean, you don't be at a place for 27 years, have the success that he's had without dealing with that kind of a pressure. But for a team that is having, like you said, a down year, and now all the hype surrounding them, you got to wonder how they're going to react to that.
Very true. Moving on, this next team I think is going to be my surprise team of the GCC. I'm going with the Shaker Heights Red Raiders, coached by Jarvis Gibson Sr. in his 7th season. Got a couple key returners coming back, and quarterback Jameer Demukes and wide receiver McCaw Hills. Those 2 guys led the Red Raiders to 5 wins this past year, which was 2 more than 2015. But like I said, 3 conference wins, and that's big for them. Their first game, they open up against Ann Arbor Skyline. Yes, that's out of Michigan. I'm sorry. That is a scheduled change. Looking at it now, they open up at home against Shaw. So their schedule changed a little bit different, so I apologize for that. Then they will have a home game against John Adams to open up them. So Shaker Heights coming off of a pretty bad year in 2015, 3-7 overall, 0-7 in the conference. Then coming back and winning 5 games, that's big for a program like that, especially in this conference. Now is the time for them to make a move, and I think with leaders like Jameer Demukes, who is really athletic, can not only throw the ball but run the ball, that's what you're going to need in a situation like this. I think my question for them is, can they make the leap towards the top end of the GCC? And I think they have the weapons on offense and enough talent on defense to do that if they can, squeak out some games against conference opponents. So that's going to be a pretty – that for me is going to be an interesting team to watch this year.
Yeah, I think the key is to win your conference games, because I think almost each of the last few years they got off to a quick start winning the non-conference games, and once they get in conference, they'll win 1 or maybe 2 conference games, and it seems like it just goes downhill from there. Shaker Heights has a lot of athletic kids on their team, offensively and defensively. They just need to establish that winning confidence. After winning the non-conference games, you need to go into your conference with some confidence, and we'll see how they do. I think conference is going to be huge for them. If they can start getting a few wins in conference, maybe that will amount to something. They'll have a good year.
Well, no doubt. And like I said, in the 2 years, just last year building on that for 2015, not winning any conference games, and then coming back last year and winning 3, going 3-4, that's a pretty big step. Now, it's just a matter of whether or not they can make that step further, making that next step up this year in 2017. The Elyria Pioneers are next. Kind of a disappointing season for them last year. They do have a new coach this year, Sean Arno, in his first season. Does have a couple key returners. Quarterback Dante Beckett is coming back, along with linebacker Quanda Woodson. Those are 2 key players for them. Like I said, Elyria, kind of a disappointing season last year. Started off relatively well, 3-2, and then ended up losing the next 5. Relatively close games, and then the final game against Mentor losing 63-34. So not an easy way or a good way to end the season, but they're looking to bounce back. The biggest question I have for them is, do they have enough support on the offensive end to support Dante Beckett? I mean, we all know in high school, if you have elite talent, they have an ability, we saw with Jimmy Dahl last year, ability to carry a team. some instances, though, that your best players on the team do need help around them, especially at the quarterback position. So we're going to see if Elyria can have enough on the offensive end to support Dante Beckett during this season. And they hope to build, hopefully improve on their 1-6 conference record of last year.
Yeah, Elyria, too. They, like you said, they had a little bit of a down year. They start off with Avon Lake, who's going to be a tough game. I think that's a good measuring stick after Avon Lake had a really good year last year. But Elyria is always a very good team. They have athletes all over the place on that team. A good system there, and I'm interested to see what they can do in the GCC this year, because it's, like you said, from top to bottom, the GCC is just a tough league.
Yeah.
You know, an Elyria team is really good, but when you stick them with Menor, you know, and you stick them with Medina, who had a really good year, and Solon and Euclid, I mean, it's just top to bottom, really good team. So who's going to stick out and do well this year in the GCC? We'll find out.
And another theme of the GCC is a tougher non-conference schedule.
Yeah.
If you look at Elyria, they open up on the road against Avon Lake. Then they have a home game against Bedford, and then they travel to Lorraine. So those
all three tough.
Yeah, all three tough, and that's what you got to do to prepare yourself for the GCC conference schedule. Strongsville Mustangs are next on the list. A disappointing 2-8 record last year, 1-6 in the conference. They also have a new coach this year, Lou Sereno, coming over from West Geauga. It's going to be a little bit different realm for him. Very good conference, very good program he had over there at West Geauga. But like we've all mentioned, this is GCC, this is Division I, this is this is where the big boys come to play, and he's got to establish a culture. That's the first thing that a new coach has to do. And he's got a few key returners coming back. Quarterback Johnny Major, offensive lineman Ryan Keaton, and running back Taylor Griffin are just a few of the key performers that are coming back this year. Good pieces to build around for sure. The question that I have for them is, does the success at which Coach Sereno had at West Geauga, can that translate quickly over to Strongsville in a tough conference? In Strongsville's, although not the past few years, but is known as a very good football program. They've been down lately, and they have the pressure. They know what it's like to be a winning football program. So can Coach Sereno bring that back to the Mustangs? Another kind of a quick note about the Strongsville this year, they are actually moving from Division I Region 1 to Division I Region 2 in the playoffs, part of the competitive balance thing. So that's going to be interesting to see how that either helps them or hurts them. More than likely, it may help them.
It's got to help them.
Yeah.
It's got to help them.
So, yeah.
They've been stuck in Division I Region 1 since the beginning of time, and anytime they make the playoffs, they always run into St. Ignatius, and they always get killed.
Yeah.
So they'll be able to, if they're able to get into the playoffs this year. Division I Region 2, that's where Brunswick resides, which Josh will get to here shortly.
Yeah.
A little bit. You don't find that meat grinder of all the big powerhouse Catholic schools and Mentor and Solon and Stowe. We have some tough teams in Division I Region 2, make no doubt about it. But all the highly publicized teams are in Division I Region 1, and Strongsville's just always traditionally had issues with them.
Strongsville opens up the season on the road against Berea Mid-Park. Then they travel to Hudson, and then their final game before conference play begins is a home game against Canton Central Catholic. Quick note, that's the Team Strongsville Community Tailgate. Make sure to check out their Facebook page for more information on that. Been involved with that for the past couple of years. Really good event, so make sure you look into that. Speaking of Strongsville, having a somewhat down year, looking to swing things in a positive direction. The next team, the Brunswick Blue Devils, looking to do the same, bringing back an old face in the coaching realm, that is, and that's Mark Pinzoni. We had him on earlier this year to talk about the move from Buckeye, very successful at Holy Name. Then he transferred over to Buckeye, was successful there, and then he's looking to bring that back to Brunswick. Of course, he was a longtime assistant. Coach Rich Nowak also coming back. Ed Dick, our very own Ed Dick, is going to be a part of that program. Last year, Brunswick with a very disappointing 2-8 record, 1-6 in the conference. some publicized, some not, but Brunswick went through a very difficult season last year on and off the field. So Coach Benzoni is going to come in there. First thing he got to do, I mentioned it earlier, he's got to change the culture. And he's changing the offense around. He's changing it from a run-first offense to a spread, how it used to be back in the day. So that is going to take some time to get some players, get some players adapted to that new style of offense, get players to match what they're looking for. So this is going to be it's going to be a lengthy turnaround, I believe. But Coach Benzoni and his staff are the right guys to do it. Maybe I'm a little biased because, I did play under that staff, and I know what they can do. When Nowak was the head coach back in the day, Brunswick was a perennial powerhouse, a perennial winner. They were always, up there with some of the top teams in the area. So they're looking to regain that, and I think they will. And that's my biggest question that I have for this team is can Coach Benzoni return the program to back what it was? And it's going to be hard. I mean, let's face it, it's going to be hard. It's going to take time. You got to develop the players to fit that system. You got to get the community support again, which it's always been there, but you still need to gather it more to get everyone on page. And the fact that he's in the GCC, which is not easy, we all talked about earlier, which is not an easy conference, it's going to be tough. But like I said, if there's any guy who has proven he can turn around a program, that's Benzoni. He's done it twice in his head coaching career. Let's see if he could do it for a third time.
Yeah, the big difference between the first, between the coaching staff's first or their longest term around here and now is the schedule. It is infinitely harder than what it was back when we all played. I mean, we had a tough non-conference schedule usually, or a tough non-conference game. Then we were really worried about Stronsville, and that evolved a little bit before Coach Nowak and the crew left in 2009. The conference got a little bit tougher, and but it's gotten to a point where the GCC is one of the toughest public school divisions in the state, if not the toughest.
Right.
Now Coach Pizzoni is no stranger to tough schedules. When he was with Holy Name, he played a tough schedule there at Holy Name. So I mean, it's not like he hasn't faced a tough schedule, but nothing like what we're seeing this year. You got Medina Highland, Bristol, Austintown, Fitch. Those are two perennial playoff teams.
Yeah.
And then you get into conference play. I mean, John Hay is a good.
Yeah,
They're a good municipal school district league from Cleveland.
Yep.
You can't sleep on them. They're a very good team. And then you get in the conference play. And Josh just went through the I'll call it again. It's a meat grinder of a conference.
Yep.
You get about 4 or 5 wins in this conference, you're pretty much assured a playoff spot.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, I think the biggest thing for Brunswick this season, with all the change, is they have to establish consistency both offensively and defensively. I think for the last couple of years, they tried to change their identity to a power running or maybe a veer type option offense, and that's when it's working, it works fantastic. But when you don't have the talent or you don't have the understanding or you're up against a defense that plays soundly, it becomes an issue. So I think maybe changing it to a more spread it out, get the ball into the playmakers' hands, let playmakers make plays. That's what that entire offense is based on. I just think it's gonna boil down to consistency, not only on the offensive and the defensive side of the ball, but special teams. Where you lost a very good kicker in Tim Dick last year, so you're gonna have to replace that. That sometimes is the difference between winning and losing is a field goal or missing an extra point. So, I mean, that's something that needs to be consistent, and I think that's maybe what Coach Penzoni is preaching. Consistency, because you can build on that. You can focus talent around that, especially in a new system. Understand the language, understand what you need to do, and go forward from there.
Well, I think Ed touched on it a little bit. The conference when we played with Coach Penzoni was a little bit different, obviously, than what it is now. The teams that we played then, they were impressive and they were good, but they weren't as good as what it is right now. And I think he has to, get used to the conference, to get used to these teams, and and the offense and all the players have to get used to the way they play and stuff. And it's going to take a little bit of time, but he's a smart guy. He knows how to work with these players and get them to learn at their best. It was tough when they went to an option offense. Especially after all the years and in youth leagues where they did things a little bit differently. So Coach Pinzoni will have to get them used to everything again, and really, and he's going to scout his opponents and teams in the conference. So he's going to prepare this team. It's just how quick will these guys get used to the offense and defense. I think they're going to be fine, but it's going to take a little bit of time. Don't expect them to go from 2 wins to a big-time playoff team at 8 wins in a season. I think they could maybe get. They could get 4 or 5 wins. You just don't know. But
we're going to win all 10. Damn it!
And I hope they do, but it's going to take a little time. And people out there, if they get 4 or 5 wins and they're like, oh man, this team's not good. It's going to take time, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that you mentioned about Menor with all the hype surrounding it, I think that's the same type of feeling that I'm getting from the Brunswick fan base. Is we got one of our own back. We got Pinzoni back. We got
Ed Dick back.
We're getting the band back together a little bit, and the expectations may be out there that we're going to be heads and shoulders better than we were last year. And I think maybe you have to tamper that down a little bit and say, look, we need to first establish what the fundamentals are in this team and build off of that, because you obviously you'd like to go undefeated your first season as the head coach at Brunswick. That'd be great, and that's what you're shooting for. But if you go into a season expecting that, and under really a first year of a head coaching tenure, that's a lot of unneeded pressure on a team that needs to kind of find its identity offensively and defensively.
No doubt, and a lot of it is for us is just making sure we're playing the right way.
Yeah,
you play the right way. You play tough. Trust each other. Stick together. That's the theme of the year. And
absolutely.
We can't separate from one another. You have to stay a cohesive unit the entire way through.
Yeah.
As long as you stick together, things are going to turn out all right. And I think that I think we're going to be in a good spot this year. Not only this year but also to build on in the years in the future.
Yeah, and I think Josh, your conference is going to keep you quite busy this year.
Always does.
That's the way he likes it.
There's going to be a lot of I'm looking forward to a lot of your recaps of the week, because you're just going to see a really competitive league. And I think, like I said, all of our leagues are, but that in particular, as Ed mentioned, is probably one of the premier public school leagues in the state, and a lot of champions come out of that particular league, or a lot of playoff teams that go deep into that playoff come out of that league. So, very interesting this year.
Well, thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. And I look forward to the coverage.
Yeah. Josh, Jeffy, great job on the GCC. It's going to be fun.
Yes, sir.